Alright, howdy my totally tubular gamers, and we're back with, you guessed it as always, another ranking video. And today we're going to be doing a Pokemon ranking video. Today we're going to be looking at all of the Pokemon games on the Nintendo Switch. Now Pokemon doesn't need an introduction. You know Pokemon, your mom, your aunt, your uncle, your friends, your dad, your dog, your cat, your grandma, everybody knows Pokemon. And when it comes to games, you know there's well over 100 Pokemon games, and we'd be here all day if we wanted to talk about every Pokemon game. I haven't even played every Pokemon game, so we can't do that. But you know what I have played? Every Pokemon game released for the Nintendo Switch. Really, since the Switch came out, we've been regularly getting new Pokemon games for it. We're now at 11 Pokemon games for the Switch. I really just don't know what happened. And you know, after playing through the recent Scarlet and Violet, I thought, why not rank them? Let's rank every Pokemon game on the Switch. I've played all of them. Funny enough, I don't even really consider myself a big Pokemon fan, but here we are where I've played all of them. I won't be including anything released on the Nintendo Switch Online app, like the Virtual Console, whatever they call that thing. I'll be looking at every game on the Switch with the Pokemon name, though. It doesn't take a genius to figure out this list is going to be outdated as well, so just keep that in mind. And we're going to be going off mostly quality, my personal experience, how I feel about the game, all that good stuff. I'm sure plenty of people are going to disagree with me. I swear there's not a community that disagrees more with each other than Pokemon, outside of maybe Sonic. And you know, that's just how things are going to be. So before you roast me in the comments, let me know your favorites first. Like, share, sub, all that good stuff. Let's just get right into it. What do I think is the weakest Pokemon game on the Switch? I think the weakest game is Pokemon Cafe Remix, a downloadable free-to-play puzzle game developed by Genius. The game released on Switch and mobile in 2020, and to be honest, this was one of those games that I had never even heard of until I was about to do this video and went, oh, I have never played this game, and so quickly tried it and was not impressed at all. Now, you know, Pokemon and puzzle games, they got a bit of a history. I remember Pokemon Puzzle League on the 64, and so maybe this game was alright. Yeah, no, Pokemon Puzzle League on 64 was much better than this game. While this game does have a pretty cute aesthetic, I won't lie, all it is just a very basic matching game. You really just match the Pokemon heads to each other, and that's like the whole gameplay. There might be a little bit more nuance than that, but really that's all I got from it. And then you bring in all the free-to-play mobile crap, because this is also a mobile title, and you just, yeah, no, it's not worth playing, where you've gotta, you know, you can only play a little bit, and then you gotta wait, or you can pay more money, and then there's a bunch of monetization. No, I did not even bother with it. I was like, this is a very, very basic puzzle game, and I'm not even a huge puzzle guy, but this was just, no. There's a reason it's free to play, and there's a reason I had like never heard of it before this list. It is not worth playing, and just go play Pokemon Puzzle League on 64. It wipes the floor with this game. That game is still good. And so here is Pokemon Quest, another downloadable free-to-play title. This one was released in 2018, and it was also released on mobile devices. I remember when this game came out, people were pretty desperate to play a full-fledged Pokemon game on their Switch, and this was one of the first Pokemon games released for the Switch, and I remember trying it and being immediately very disappointed. I remember just being kind of weirded out by the art style. It's like this blocky, voxel-based art style that's similar to, you guessed it, Minecraft, because what else am I going to compare it to? And I just don't really like how the game looks. And then the game only has Region 1, it only is Kanto, so only the original like 150, which, you know, I love the original 150, but just kind of weird they'd only have those. But what even is this game? Well, it's two parts really. It seems to be a bit of a dungeon crawler where you go through these levels with your Pokemon, just kind of attacking other Pokemon and going through the level that's pretty linear. And then the other part seems to be this kind of base camp management where you manage your camp and level up your Pokemon and take care of them. Now, the gameplay in these levels is like mind-numbingly basic. Now, I don't play Pokemon because it's complex or anything like that, but this was just ridiculously basic. Like, there's even an auto button where the game basically just plays itself and you don't even need to do anything in these levels. Like, I was just like, wow, this is basic, even for Pokemon. So the levels I didn't think were very good at all, and the general battle gameplay was just pretty bland. And then the actual base camp management where you attract new Pokemon and make recipes and set up your little camp and all of that, I just didn't really think anything of this either. I was like, there's just not really much here. And then of course, you know, it's got all the typical free-to-play nonsense where they want you to buy DLC and you gotta wait on timers and all this other shit, and there's like this expansion pack. And no, I was definitely good off this game pretty quick. I'm not a big mobile game guy, and this game definitely felt like a mobile game. It basically played itself, and I was just like, there's just not really much here. This just isn't very good. I've heard some people get pretty into it and have some fun with it, so maybe I'm missing something here, but I just didn't really like what this game was putting down, and I quickly jumped on to the next game because I just wasn't really interested in what this game had. And so here we have Pokemon Unite, another downloadable free-to-play title. This is a MOBA developed by Timmy Studio Group of Tencent. Yeah, this just really isn't my game. I don't like MOBAs, and after a few games of this, I was immediately turned off, and it's aggressive microtransactions. You know what? We're just gonna skip this one. I'm good. And so our next game is Pokken Tournament DX, initially releasing on the Wii U in 2016, but would be ported over to the Switch in 2017. This is actually the first Pokemon game released for the Switch. Now, as the name implies, this is a mix of Pokemon and Tekken, the famous fighting game series by Bandai Namco. It was even made by the same studio. Now, I love Tekken. Tekken is one of my favorite fighting game series of all time. I've even ranked all the Tekken games here on my channel. I really do love Tekken, but this game ain't it. This game really does not play like Tekken. It's actually one of the weirdest playing fighting games like I've ever seen. I remember initially trying this in an arcade in Japan and just being completely weirded out, and then trying it on the Switch and being like, this really just is not it for me. So it is a fighting game. How are the characters? I actually think this is one area that the game really excels at. I think the roster of Pokemon is actually really good. There's a lot of fan favorites here and a lot of Pokemon you wouldn't expect to get in, but they're here, like my man Krogunk. But the fighting is just so different. It's so weird. You can like freely move around the arena, similar to say those Naruto Ultimate Ninja Storm games. So yeah, you can just freely walk around and you just use a bunch of attacks. There's some combos here, but there's a lot of projectiles, a lot of blocking. There's some launchers, buffs, debuffs, special moves. You can even have Mega Evolutions here, which is built up as the Synergy Gauge, basically your super. And really, you just fight. This game, if you couldn't tell, or if you've ever played it, is much more casual than really any other fighting game. It's really designed to just pick up and play, pick up and do some cool looking moves and just fight each other. It isn't all that balanced. It doesn't try to be all that complex or even close to technical like Tekken. While the game does have a ton of nuances to it, I just never really had much fun with it. I mean, I'm sure it can get really deep, but I just never got to that level because I just didn't really enjoy what I was playing enough to. I think this game's best aspect and the most fun I've had with it is expectedly the multiplayer. I've actually had some decent fun with the multiplayer in this game, especially in the 3v3 mode. I like the 3v3 mode because it's like regular Pokemon, and you know, you just play with a buddy, you kick the crap out of each other. It's actually a pretty decent time, but overall I would just not really recommend Pokken Tournament to anybody outside of maybe fighting game aficionados, and even they will probably not like it too much. There's a reason this game didn't really stay on all that much. It just didn't seem to have a ton of lasting power in the fighting game community, unless I'm missing a bunch of underground tournaments, and I just thought this game was rather lackluster, and I just don't really think it's worth playing nowadays. And so here we have Pokemon Sword and Shield releasing in 2019. Now, I remember when this game was coming out, everyone was real hyped for this big mainline new Pokemon game built up for the Switch. It's going to be great, it's going to be different. I was also decently excited, and after playing it, I remember walking away so disappointed and just unhappy. So much so that I made like a 30-minute rant review about the game and why I disliked it. Obviously, I'm not going to go into that much detail, I'll just give you a few of the tidbits here. I should also note that I never played the DLC for this game. I heard from a couple people the DLC made the game a lot better, but I shouldn't have to play DLC to make this game even good to begin with, because the base game, it just wasn't good. My biggest issue was it felt so simplistic, watered down, and just basic when it comes to not only any other RPGs, but Pokemon games in general. Like, look, I know Pokemon, it's not the most difficult series, it's not the most challenging and rewarding series, and it doesn't have, you know, a ton of depth to it compared to, say, some of its other RPG contemporaries, but this was a big step down from any of the other Pokemon games. I just could not believe how basic this game was in like every aspect. When it came to the story, there was just really not much to it. It was as generic and bland of a Pokemon story as it gets, where you want to be the best and beat the gym leaders, and then there's a not Team Rocket, this time called Team Loud, and then beat the Elite Four. There was nothing special, there was nothing interesting, none of the characters were good, like just nothing was going on here. The story was just so uninspired, and I didn't think the region was all that interesting interesting either. The UK, I mean, that could be interesting, but I just didn't really like the area. And then when it came to the level design, world design, all of that, it was just as basic as the story. There's two parts to it. There's the routes / gyms, and then there was also the wild area. The routes and gyms were just terribly designed. Like, they are just straight lines. They're incredibly boring and easy. There's no puzzles. There's really nothing interesting in any of these levels, and I found myself falling asleep walking through them. The wild area is actually pretty good. It's the best part of the entire game, not even close, where you walk around this big open area and just catch Pokemon. You can get into encounters with Pokemon of all different sorts of levels, so you can get completely obliterated by like a level 50 Onix at the beginning of the game. And I genuinely did like the wild area. It's the best part of the game. They should have just focused on this for the whole game, and I think the game would have actually been much better, but instead a majority of the game is going through the routes and the gyms like every other Pokemon game. But I just can't believe how poorly they were designed, like how little thought went into these areas. And then when it actually came to the battles, it was again so easy, so basic. You don't even need to know the type advantages in this game. You'll just win. I never even came close to losing once. The game's battle gimmick is Dynamaxing, where the Pokemon turns big, and this was cool, you know, like the first time I saw it, and then I thought it was incredibly lame. Wow, it turns big, that's it. And then there's these raids that center around it. Never really put much time into this or the multiplayer or thought even. Then when it came to the presentation, that was another point of contention. The game didn't look very good for 2019. It kind of ran poorly. The trees look awful, and the animation was pretty poor, all things considered. I don't think this is a very good game. I think this is like the worst of the mainline Pokemon games. There was a few good things here, don't get me wrong. Some of the new Pokemon were cool. They didn't include all the old Pokemon for whatever reason. I mean, there's no random encounters. You can see them, so that's cool, but it doesn't really help out the game. I don't think this is a good game. I don't recommend this game, not even to Pokemon fans. You compare this game to pretty much any other mainline Pokemon game, and I think it just falls apart, let alone any other RPG of, say, 2019. Now, I don't know if this is just some hot take I have, but I didn't like it then. I definitely don't like it now, and I would rather play just about any other Pokemon RPG out there than this game. So our next game is Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, releasing for the Switch in 2018. I know it's kind of crazy to think now, but this was the first mainline Pokemon game released for a home console, and as such the game did sell like crazy. But coming back to it, yeah, this game is just okay. The game really is just a remake of Pokemon Yellow. It is the same story, the same structure, but it does add a bunch of quality of life things from later Pokemon games and some Pokemon Go integration. It's got, you know, the OG Kanto region, the original 151 Pokemon, complete now with Mega Evolved forms and Alolan forms. The story really is that of the original anime. You know, you play as your trainer and you just want to be the very best. You got all the classic gym leaders, you got Team Rocket, you got the Elite Four. Nothing's really different there at all. And you know, it's a fine enough little story. It's classic. It's legendary really at this point. And when it comes to this game's presentation, obviously it's going to look just a little better than Fire Red. It actually looks pretty alright, and the game runs fine enough, so it gets a thumbs up in my book. Now, when it comes to gameplay changes, the biggest change in this game has to do with catching Pokemon. So first off, random encounters are gone. This was like the first time random encounters have ever been gone in Pokemon. It's about damn time. You can actually just see them on the map, you just walk up, and then you can try to catch them. And catching them is totally different in this game. You don't have to battle them like before and then throw the ball and hope that they are caught. No, instead it's much more like Pokemon Go, the phone game. You know, Pokemon go to the polls.
Pokemon go to the polls.
You really just line the circle up and throw the ball. It's that easy. If you're playing in docked mode, you have to play with one Joy-Con and use the motion controls and actually throw the Pokeball. I've always really disliked this. Like, why are they forcing motion controls onto me like this? I don't like this. If you play handheld, you can just, you know, use an analog stick like it should have been to begin with. But I shouldn't have to play handheld mode just to get basic controller movement. I don't like how you catch Pokemon in this game. Pokemon Go on the phone was fine and easy. This is a full-fledged Switch game. It shouldn't be this. I get they were trying to go for, I guess, a casual audience or connected to Pokemon Go, but I don't like it. I think that how Fire Red had it was actually better, and I'd rather just catch Pokemon the old-fashioned way than this. Your experience is also dependent on how you catch the Pokemon, like the spin or how accurate the circle was and all of that, just like Pokemon Go, and I just don't really like it. They even bring the candies in from Pokemon Go and the combat power, and I'm just like, why are they making it so much like Pokemon Go instead of making it more like Pokemon Yellow? Part of me actually thinks they should have just made a new Pokemon game with all of Go stuff in mind rather than Pokemon Yellow and implementing all this Go stuff into it, but that's just me. Something new also is that your Pokemon will follow you in Let's Go mode, and that's cute, that's cool, I like that, and they actually keep that around for later Pokemon games, and they can help you out and tell you where like hidden items are and stuff. And then of course a big part of this game was actually connecting it to Pokemon Go on your phone and all that integration and stuff, but to be honest I just never really did this. I just didn't really like the game enough to do that, and I didn't even really love Pokemon Go either. Of course I was into it when it started, but by this point I really wasn't playing Pokemon Go. All in all though, despite my grievances, I still think this is a good game, and this is still a pretty good version of Pokemon Red, Yellow, or Blue to play. I mean, it's easily the most accessible. Even with all the motion control BS and Go integration, this is probably the best way to play Pokemon Yellow at this point. I mean, it's not crusty and it runs faster and has shared XP and all those nice things that modern games have. I'm sure most diehard Pokemon people have already played through this game numerous times, and so, I mean, if you haven't, you could try it. It's probably on the cheaper side now, I would hope. But yes, it is a good game, it is worth playing, and I love Let's Go Eevee. That's the version to get. And so our next game is Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team Director's Cut, releasing in March of 2020. Now this game is also a remake. It is a remake of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Blue and Red Rescue Team. Now I actually do have a lot of history with these games and am mega fans of these games, and so I was very excited to see that this was getting a remake and instantly bought it. And you know what? I still think it's pretty good all these years later. Now, I know this game isn't everyone's cup of tea, and it has some issues, believe me, I know, but playing through this game again and coming back to it all these years later, like, maybe it's just the nostalgia hitting me hard, but I just had such a great time playing through it again. And it is easily the definitive way to play the original Mystery Dungeon. This game adds a bunch of quality of life things like auto-saving and mega evolutions and speeding everything up, and then it has a new art style too that looks almost like a painting. I love how this game looks. I think it's so cute, I think it looks so cool, and it really just looks great. I really do like the style, and then the game has the story and the original quiz intact where you take a quiz and then they determine a Pokemon, a starter Pokemon for you. There's a couple that aren't starters that are also thrown in there, and the story's the same. You're a human that somehow becomes a Pokemon. You then meet up with your partner of choice and the two of you really start your own rescue team, and the story just goes from there. I think it's super cute. I've always loved the story of this game. It's nothing too complex or crazy, especially for even Pokemon, but I've always just liked it. Now when it comes to playing this game, it's part of the Mystery Dungeon series, which if you don't know is a dungeon crawler series where you go through randomly generated floors, defeating enemies, finding treasures, and generally just trying to get down to the next floor. The game is a mission structure where you go to the bulletin board and you receive your next mission. Some of these are the story missions, and then there's plenty of random, infinitely generating missions as well. You then go into the dungeon, and usually it's to rescue somebody or help someone out or bring them an item. And then when you're in the dungeons, like I said, it's randomly generated, so every dungeon floor is different every single time. You move along a grid, it's turn-based. When you move, and enemies move as well. When you attack, enemies will attack after. It uses the typical Pokemon weaknesses and general type advantages, all that fun, typical Pokemon stuff. Your Pokemon actually do get hungry as you go through these dungeons, so you will have to bring food, particularly usually an apple to eat. And something different is that Pokemon will sometimes join you after you defeat them. Yeah, you'll defeat them and they'll want to join the rescue team, and you can have them join you or not. They'll join you for the rest of the dungeon, and then if you leave with them, they're part of the team. Now when it comes to this gameplay loop, I won't lie, it's a bit unremarkable. It isn't the most exciting, it doesn't do anything mind-blowing. And once you get towards the end of the game, and especially in the post-game, it becomes pretty grindy. You'll have to grind a lot of these floors, and the game can actually get pretty challenging. The first, 3/4 of the game, it doesn't really put up much of a challenge at all, but once you start to get towards the end of the game, and then of course all the post-game stuff, this game is no problem just throwing you in a 90-floor dungeon and expect you to just survive. But I don't know, there was just something about it that I always thought was so fun, and it always just had me coming back for more. I put so much time into this game as a kid. I remember I tried to get like every Pokemon. I just loved it. Obviously I didn't do that for the remake, but I did play quite a lot of this game, and I still really do enjoy it. Now something else I really like about this game is the music. I think the music slaps really hard. It's just really solid. You've heard a bunch of it throughout this video, and I have nothing but good things to say. I recommend this game. I think it was a little unfairly criticized. It's not amazing and it won't totally blow your mind, but I think it's a pretty good, fun little RPG, and it's a good little dungeon crawler. Okay, so our next game is another remake. It is Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. These came out in 2021 and are remakes of Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, the 2006 DS games. Now, I actually did buy Pokemon Diamond back when it came out. I was a kid then, but I was a huge Pokemon kid. I was so excited for it, and here I am all these years later as an adult now buying the remake day one as well. And you know, I gotta say, these are actually pretty faithful remakes to the original Diamond and Pearl. It brought back a lot of good memories and some bad memories for sure. The story and the setting is exactly the same as the original, taking place in the Sinnoh region, and the story really is about you just trying to be the best and stopping Team Galactic as well. And you know, the story and characters, really, it's nothing to go crazy over. Team Galactic seems pretty murdery for a Pokemon game, but yeah, it's nothing too crazy or special. It's fine enough. The character designs are always going to be legendary for this game, though. Now, something that is obviously different from the original is the game's presentation. And when it comes to the graphics of this game, I really don't like the art style. I don't really like the chibi style. They kind of look like Funko Pops when they're walking around in the world. During battle, they look fine. In fact, I think this game actually looks pretty alright, and at least the frame rate's fine and it doesn't run like ass. I'd say the presentation's a bit of a mixed bag. I'd say the soundtrack is a bit of a mixed bag as well. The original soundtrack really bumped, I really liked it, but some of these new remixes and redos of the music, I don't know about it. But when it comes to playing the game, yeah, I think it's actually pretty solid. It's still a pretty good Pokemon game. There's a few quality of life improvements here, but I still think this is one of the finer Pokemon experiences. I think all of the areas are pretty unique. I really do like the Pokemon they added in Gen 4, especially for like some of the older Pokemon like Magmar. And I think, you know, going along all the routes and through the gyms and fighting Team Galactic, I think it's actually pretty interesting. I stayed engaged and it's a fun time. The game isn't too challenging, especially if you choose Turtwig as your starter. But hey, anything's better than Sword and Shield. The Elite Four can actually kick your ass though if you aren't prepared. They did add a new area to this version of the game called the Grand Underground, which is this huge underground dungeon where Pokemon just walk freely around and it's not random encounters and you can catch them, and it's a bunch of Pokemon that aren't really in the main game at all, so that's cool. They added in a bunch of Pokemon that wouldn't have been there otherwise. So while I still think Diamond and Pearl are one of the better mainline Pokemon games, and you know, I'll always have that love for them, I'm no idiot either. I know that Platinum is way better than Diamond and Pearl and adds a ton of stuff, and for whatever reason, these remakes don't have anything that Platinum added. They don't have any of the story content, the areas, the Pokemon. And with this in mind, I can't say this is the definitive version of these games. I think the best version of Gen 4 is going back to the DS and playing Platinum. And you know, this is supposed to be a remake. It's supposed to be the definitive version, and it's not. And so that definitely hurts it a bit. I still think it is a pretty good game, and if you were a big fan of the originals, yeah, go check them out. They're still fun nowadays, but yeah, they might not be as good as Platinum if that's what you played back in the day. Alright, and so here we got the latest Pokemon game as of the recording of this video, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I just recently finished it, and you know, maybe it's a recency bias, but I actually thought this game was pretty good. But you know what, I'm just going to address the elephant in the room, the game's presentation and how it runs. It's just awful. Like, the game looks bad, it runs terribly, the frame rate's awful, there's popping everywhere, the animation is poor, and it really just looks like a 360 game, maybe like an early PS4 game on good days. The lighting is all over the place, the textures are crazy muddy, and sometimes the game gets down to single digits with its frame rate. It truly is bad when it comes to the presentation. Is it as bad as the internet has made it out to be? No, of course not. It's not unplayable, but it certainly is bad. And it's a real shame, because I think if the presentation wasn't what it was, or at least the game just ran stably at 60 FPS, I think people would be saying this is one of the best Pokemon games like ever made. But due to the game clearly being rushed out of the door and basically just unfinished, I absolutely cannot recommend it in this state. Don't go buy it, even though it seems a ton of people already have. But with that out of the way, the game actually does a number of things to move the series forward, and it actually brings some real innovation to the main series. The story isn't exactly the most complex, but it is a bit different from the other games. Of course, you want to be the very best, but you actually go to school and like go to class, and getting the gym badges is part of the school's program. There's also these bullies that is this version's Team Rocket, Team Star, but they're a lot more complex than that. And then of course there's helping out one of your friends fight these giant Pokemon known as the Titans in order to get some good recipes. While the story doesn't do anything you haven't seen before, the characters are actually pretty decent in this game. I actually did like the characters in this game. I thought that they had some decent arcs and were somewhat memorable. I think that they're some of the best characters Pokemon has ever had. But when it comes to playing this game and exploring it, it feels like the wild area from Sword and Shield, but that's the whole game, and it's actually really decently designed. I like the game's openness. You can legit go anywhere you want from the start of the game. Being able to go anywhere you want is a good change of pace for the series, and it allows you to totally go fight Pokemon that are way stronger than you, and you can actually make the game challenging. The other thing is the world is actually decently designed in this game. There's actually a lot going on here, and it never feels lifeless since you can see the Pokemon roaming around again. There's no random encounters. You got to run into them, and there are Pokemon everywhere here. And I think the traversal options you have with your not motorcycle Pokemon are actually pretty cool. This game even has kind of a let's go mechanic where your Pokemon, your first selected Pokemon, will follow you around and will attack other Pokemon, and you can have a battle just instantly start and stop at the same time basically, and you even get experience for it, so it's actually a good addition. You can't catch Pokemon like Pokemon Legends where you just throw the Pokeball and scare them, but I mean, you won't be catching anywhere near as many Pokemon as you did in that game. I'm pretty alright with it, and I don't think the pacing is ruined by the fact that you have to catch Pokemon, I guess the more old school way. Speaking of the pacing, the game's pacing's actually good since you get to kind of set the pacing. You can go do whatever you want since it's so open, and I actually like this. I thought that the pacing in Sword and Shield was just abysmal, and this is so much better. Now, the actual battles are pretty much what you've come to expect for Pokemon. There's nothing too crazy here. The game doesn't have any, crazy differences from the old ones when it comes to type advantages or anything like that, to my understanding. I'm not a hardcore Pokemon guy, but it seemed the same as someone who's played a bunch of the games. This game's battle gimmick is this crystal form, and it really doesn't add much. It's really just a buff. It's basically the same as Dynamaxing. It's a bit prettier than Dynamaxing, at least. The game even brings the raids back from Sword and Shield, and I care just as little about them as I did then, but generally, I actually think that this is a pretty good game. Hunting the Titans was cool, Team Star was a fun diversion where you have your Pokemon run around and fight all of their Pokemon, and I think the gyms, instead of having you go through an obstacle course, they try to make these little challenges for each gym to mixed results. I mean, some of them were pretty stupid, and the mini games you play weren't good, but I mean, it was a good diversion, and they actually just tried something different. And really, that's what I appreciate the most. They did try something different. Most of it hits. It's actually pretty good. And if it wasn't for that awful presentation, I swear people would be loving this game. The music is also amazing. I love the music. Toby Fox is great. The music is great in this game. Overall, I think Pokemon Scarlet, it's a shame that the presentation is so ass. It's not Cyberpunk levels of bad where the game is borderline unplayable and just awful and buggy. No, it's nowhere near as bad as that. You just gotta set your expectations. It looks and runs like shit, even though this is the most profitable media of all time. This is clearly some tiny little indie company that has no money and can't afford to make the game run or look any better. Such a shame. Well, if they ever fix the game, which I doubt, this will be one of the best Pokemon games ever. Not even close. Alright, and so here we have what I believe to be one of the very best Pokemon spin-offs, and that is New Pokemon Snap, releasing in early 2021. New Pokemon Snap, it is the sequel to the famous classic Pokemon Snap on N64. Now, I love the original Pokemon Snap. I played it as a very young kid and just really fell in love with it. I've played through it so many times, and so when they announced a new Pokemon Snap, you know I lost my shit immediately. I really did, and this was an immediate day one purchase for me. And I gotta say, after playing all the way through it, oh, it was so good. This game is just excellent. This game really looks at that original game and just builds on top of it so many times over that it makes the old game not irrelevant, but there's just no reason to ever go back to that original game. This game really just blows the old one out of the water. The original game had pretty great gameplay, they just needed more of it, and that's what this game has. It's still a first-person shooter, essentially. You're on rails, but instead of shooting bullets or projectiles, you're taking pictures. You have a few other tools at your disposal to help you get those pictures, but really, the game is all about taking those pictures. Since it is on rails, all the Pokemon basically follow a track, so they'll all run out by you. Some of them are sleeping, some of them are eating. They're really just interacting with the world, and it's up to you to also interact with the world to figure out how to maybe get the best picture, best angle, etc. And your vehicle is more mobility. You can still fly like the first game, but you can also go underwater, and even with the updates you can now shrink and see new areas that you could have never seen before. and you can look a lot more freely than you could in the original. Granted, the original was an N64 game, so I'm gonna cut us some slack. Really, the gameplay isn't all that different from that original game, but what they've done is they've just added a bunch of stages, areas, and conditions. For instance, the original game, I think it had like 5 or 6 stages. You play through them all once and you've pretty much seen everything. This game, you can play through every stage during the day and night, and we'll have different Pokemon show up. They'll be doing different things. There's a bunch of stages, and then some stages even have more than one route, so you'll have to play through these stages a ton of times. The game counts on you playing through these stages over and over and over in order to see new Pokemon, see them do different things, and get different pictures of them. You get ranked on your pictures depending on what they're doing, how many are involved. There's a couple different conditions, and it makes a lot more sense than the originals where a Pikachu on a stump was worth a ton of points. Here, it makes more sense. And I won't lie, I got pretty obsessed with trying to get all those stars for all the Pokemon. I didn't do it, there's just so many Pokemon, but getting the stars is actually really fun. It's so cool, this game even has like bosses. You actually go up against bosses to try to take pictures of them. I just really did enjoy my time with this game. I am still so shocked that the game actually was made 20 plus years later after the original, but I'm so glad it was made because it's everything I ever wanted from the original as a kid, and now it's here. Sure, I'm an adult and nowhere near as imaginative or have as much free time, but I really did love this game, and if I was a kid nowadays, I would have lost my damn mind. Oh yeah, and then the presentation, it's probably the best presentation for like any Pokemon game ever. Like, it looks great, everything animates great, the frame rate is fantastic. This is probably the best these Pokemon have ever looked outside of maybe like Smash Brothers. Like, they all look great. I love the presentation, and this game, it wasn't enough. No, what they did was even better. They added some free post-launch content. They added 3 new levels, 20-ish new Pokemon. Like, I don't know what else to even ask for. This game is just fantastic. It's brimming with content. You can get so much content out of this game. I know this game isn't everyone's jam. There were plenty of people who were like, oh, Pokemon Snap, you take photos, I want to battle them and stuff. Go ahead, play a game where you battle them. But when it comes to just being a fun-ass video game, I love this game, and I cannot recommend it enough. What a great time. But what I believe to be the best Pokemon game on the Switch, and maybe the best Pokemon game like of all time, is Pokemon Legends Arceus, releasing in early 2022. This game just blew my mind with how good it actually was. I went into this game with pretty low expectations. I was like, it just doesn't really look that great. Is it like Breath of the Wild with Pokemon? Sword and Shield was crap also. Is this going to be any better? And then no. I played all the way through it, and I can confirm all of those are wrong. This game actually kicks some ass. The game basically is a prequel to Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. The game does not take place during modern day. It takes place during like early Japanese colonization. The beginning of the story is really weird as you're in modern day, but then you get like, I guess, time traveled back to this time by Arceus, the Pokemon god. And it tasks you with finding all of the Pokemon to be found on this island, and that's really the whole story. I mean, you meet up with like a professor and a couple other characters, and you find a local settlement named Jubileaf Village, but ultimately what you're doing is creating like the first Pokedex. Yeah, the story, it's not amazing, it's pretty silly, and part of it just doesn't really make much sense like the beginning of the game, but if you just look past that, I mean, it's fine enough. The characters aren't exactly memorable, but again, it's fine enough, and the biggest thing is that it's just different. The setting is unique and the characters are unique. Now, when it comes to the game's presentation, it didn't look great before it came out, but I can tell you this is quite a bit better than Scarlet and Violet. The game doesn't look amazing, but it looks okay. It has a decent art style to it. It isn't the most detailed world, but again, it looks fine. The biggest thing though, it runs just fine. It's a fine enough 30 FPS. I didn't really notice any frame rate issues. It wasn't dying. The pop-in isn't atrocious. It was fine enough. But then we have how the game actually plays. It feels like the real sequel to Pokemon. Now, Pokemon, you know, Gen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever they're at now, it's not the biggest leap from gen to gen. I mean, there's some minor changes and some minor additions here and there or tweaks, but this game really actually changes a ton to the formula to the point that it feels like a real evolution of the series. The game is a lot bigger and a lot more open than most Pokemon games. Outside of Scarlet and Violet, this is the most open Pokemon game to date. You have 5 giant biomes to explore, and yeah, it is kind of like Breath of the Wild, I guess, in that sense, as you have a giant open world that you can explore to your heart's content. But what's in this giant world? Why, Pokemon, of course. Battling and catching Pokemon, though, is very different in this game from every other Pokemon game. See, this game, you don't actually have to battle them to catch them, and you don't have to do some stupid Pokemon Go minigame either. See, in this game, you can actually just catch the Pokemon. Like, you just throw the Pokeball at them and catch them. It's really that simple. You don't have to fight them. Some Pokemon, you know, if they're way stronger, you're going to have to fight, but you really can just throw the Pokeball at them. So it adds this whole other element to the game. An element not seen before in Pokemon, where you actually have to sneak up on Pokemon, throw a Pokeball at them. There's different types of Pokeballs. Their power level comes into play depending on your Pokemon as well. There's a lot of factors here, but a lot of the game is spent just walking around, maybe sneaking around, throwing Pokeballs at unexpected Pokemon and getting them like that. A lot of this game really is all about catching the Pokemon, whether it's for the story or whether it's a side quest for some character in town, or you're just doing it for your own good to try to complete the Pokedex. You'll be catching a ton of Pokemon. In fact, I'd say that's what a majority of the gameplay is just catching Pokemon. Of course, like I mentioned, some Pokemon are way too strong to catch that way, and you're going to have to do it the old-fashioned way, where you get into battle, beat them up, and then throw the Pokeball. The battles in this game are way faster than anything before. It's incredibly seamless, as you really just throw your Pokemon out right there wherever you're standing, and the battles are very fast. They're very quick, and you know, the actual gameplay, it's not really any different than what Pokemon had before. It's just been sped up, and it feels like it's been modernized. But the battles have one new little nuance, and that's that every move basically is 3 variants of it. A sped up, weaker version, a powerful, slow version, and then the normal move. You can do the normal move, but you can also do the big, powerful version, but you might be slower and not able to attack the next turn, or you might be able to attack twice if you use the sped up move, but it's going to be weaker. I think it adds a little bit to this, and I actually really did like it. It feels really smooth, and it's no walk in the park either, especially during the end game and post game. Like, the game has no problem throwing really high level Pokemon that can destroy you like instantly at you, and I appreciate the challenge. It's about time we got something like this. Speaking of challenge, you don't gotta just worry about your Pokemon getting attacked, you gotta worry about getting attacked too. For the first time ever, you can get attacked by these Pokemon, and you can actually be KO'd yourself. And if you're KO'd, you lose like a ton of items, so not a good idea. You even fight bosses in this game, and when you're fighting them, you gotta dodge their attacks. Like, these giant Pokemon will attack you, the alphas they call them. But you aren't alone here. It's not just you, the trainer. You do have some Pokemon to help you. This game does have a number of traversal options to it, which is cool. I like how this game has actually got some variety when it comes to not only the landscapes you'll travel, but how you'll travel as well. I'll be real, the gameplay just feels like a complete overhaul that Pokemon has needed forever, and it's like, wow, it actually showed up. I never thought they'd really make an overhaul so big for the series, but you know, I just had a really great time playing through this. I really liked catching the Pokemon. That was my favorite part of the game. But the RPG stuff, the battles, and exploring the world was actually really well done also. The side quests weren't a total joke here either, as usually it's just catching more Pokemon. I've never felt so obligated to actually catch every Pokemon in a Pokemon game since like I was a kid. But here I am trying to collect like as many as I can. It also helps that it's mostly older Pokemon, the ones I really know and love, so that's always going to help, but there are a few newer ones I think in there, right? Now, as great as this game is, I will say if you don't like Pokemon to begin with, I don't know how you made it this far in the video, but I mean, you're probably not going to love this game. You might like it more than the other ones, but you're probably not going to love this one. But for us who like Pokemon, and if you made it to this part of the video, you probably do like Pokemon, so I really appreciate you watching. I hope you've enjoyed this game as well, because I really recommend this game way above everything else on this list, except maybe new Pokemon Snap. Like, this game is just great. This has become one of my favorite RPGs, not only of the year, but in general. Like, it's actually hella good, and I would argue that it maybe is the best Pokemon game of all time. Like, it's just not even close for me. But that's it for this video. Again, thank you so much if you made it to this part of the video. If you made it to this part of the video, comment bricks in the comments. You'll get a heart from me. Thank you very, very much. I really do appreciate it. I put a lot of time into this one, and it took me a long time to play through some of these games, but here we are. If you'd like to see me look at more Pokemon games, let me know down below. If you want to see any kind of ranking video, you let me know down below. I'm always taking notes. Seriously, I really do care. Thank you so much for watching. I hope everyone has a wonderful Christmas, New Year's, Valentine's Day, whatever the next holiday is near you. See you later. Bye-bye.